Well, David, we got the first surprise of the offseason with the firing of special teams coordinator Derius Swinton. But on the flip side, some Chargers got some well deserved all pro honors.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers now for over 5 seasons, doing our own Facebook Live show to start Chargers Domination Live. Now, this is our 4th season, going on our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Well, David, especially after seeing, teams like the Raiders lose and the Patriots lose, feeling a little bit better this week. Cowboys, you can add into that as well. I mean, definitely a better vibe this week, seeing those teams get bounced. But if you haven't already, make sure to go subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you guys for making us your first listen on a Monday with a ton of Chargers content to get into and some actual news that happened, of course, right before the weekend, right after we wrapped up our last show last week. But we did get the news that Derius Swinton was fired, so I definitely wanted to take a look at that, including one particular replacement that seems like it would make a lot of sense. And then we'll get into the Chargers all-pro selections. Rashawn Slater, Corey Linsley, and Andre Roberts, all well-deserved second-team all-pro honors. And having 2 all-pros on an offensive line that's been as bad as the Chargers has been super surprising and super cool, obviously. And then we'll wrap up the show with talking about how Derwin James probably got snubbed, I would say, from the all-pro list. And if there's any other Chargers who we expect to make the all-pro team next season. But starting with Derius Swinton, David, I mean, I was surprised by this, just because, I mean, first of all, it's only been 1 year. That's obviously tough. And I understand that the special teams as a whole wasn't good enough this season. I mean, 28th in DVOA from Football Outsiders. Obviously, that's towards the bottom of the league. But you could definitely feel it getting better. I mean, the last game was standing. Obviously, you have a fumble that on the punt unit obviously is going to make it feel worse. You miss a 51-yard field goal that makes it feel worse. But overall, it seemed like it was trending in the right direction, especially considering all of the young guys that they had out there. So Derius Swinton and Meyer Chidori were both let go by the Chargers, the special team assistant coach as well. And now it was just one of those things, David, where it was just like, I didn't really see it coming, because at least you could make a solid argument. Okay, well, at least it's headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the unit, as a whole from the beginning, it definitely didn't start off great. They had Tristan Vizcaino as their kicker coming out, and the guy missed 5 extra points, and that's just absolutely terrible. Those should be pretty much automatic, and to miss that many so quickly on in the season, that was something that really necessitated a change. So they were able to bring in Dustin Hopkins and Andre Roberts during the bye week of week 8. And I think that's when you really started to see things stabilize and get a lot better. But hey, how much of that is just those 2 gentlemen coming in and kind of masking some of the other deficiencies that you might not have seen when you take a look from a more macro perspective? And when you start digging into some of those other numbers, it's really not as impressive as you really want it to be. And at the end of the day, Daniel, this is a results-based business, and if you don't get the results, then you're going to be looking for another job.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, maybe there's someone out there, right, and we'll talk about that Brandon Staley could have in mind for his replacement. But obviously, Brandon Staley showing, he would let go of one of his dudes after only 1 year if he's not getting the performance that he needs. I mean, we'll never know how much of that came from the front office or upstairs, and how much of that came from Brandon Staley.
Or if there's any extenuating circumstances that we don't know about, because that's never going to come out.
I mean, I liked his overall approach, and I think when you're talking about, guys like Nick Niemann leading the team in special teams tackles, having so many rookies out there, Keeman Hall, who had never played before, Amen Albach-Bamiga had a big role, Chris Rumpf as a rookie had a big role, and towards the end, I mean, those guys blocking got a lot better on the kickoff return unit, and just overall was a lot better. But you did have a punt blocked, obviously, which sucks. It was terrible special teams-wise pretty much all the way around for the beginning of the season. So I understand we are making a move here, but I'm a little surprised. I mean, even like a Ronaldo Hill, because even though he's not like the defensive play caller, right, or anything like that, disseminating, bringing in the Staley's defense to that team is obviously a big part of that if you are a defensive coordinator. So I thought there may be a scapegoat. I wasn't expecting it to be Derius Swinton. And I think one of the big things, David, was just how bad the punt unit itself was, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, Derius Swinton was bad. 28th is not good, but 3 of the last 4 years before he got here, the Chargers were 32nd or 31st in the NFL. The one other year, 2018, 12-4, right? They were 25th. And the DVOA I like to use just because it's all encompassing. It's kickoffs, kick returns, punt coverage, all of those things put together. But like, it was a pretty monumental task that he took on, right? But the punt unit itself, maybe not enough people are talking about Ty Long being part of the problem or a bigger part of the problem, right? Because their punt unit this year, the coverage wasn't great. They were 32nd in the NFL in punt DVOA. They were at negative 14.9. The next closest team to them at 31st was negative 9.4, right? That's a 5.5 point.
Not only was it last, it was last by a lot.
Like historically bad, right? And I do think that that's another position that has to, you have to keep an eye on because Ty Long ended up being the punter and maybe they didn't bring in competition. Lachlan Edwards wasn't enough, right? Pick Tristan Vizcaino over Michael Badgley. Michael Badgley, for what it's worth, still was good at kicking short field goals, obviously. Wasn't missing extra points. But I think all of us were ready to move on. It just wasn't the right answer there. So I do get some of that, but that is a position that I think the Chargers should try to upgrade this offseason is the punter position, even though I like Ty Long, and I think he seems like he's one of the guys.
Yeah, I mean, and he definitely seems like he's a leader as well. I mean, you've seen some video clips of him, kind of tearing into some of his teammates after certain things have happened throughout the year. But I mean, I don't think we saw really any kind of directional kicking out of Ty Long. We didn't see a lot of touchbacks. Not a lot of
punts inside the 20. Yeah,
nothing inside the 20 or nothing inside the 10. Nothing. I don't think there was a single punt this year where you're like, wow, okay, that was a really, really good punt, and that really put the opposing team in a bad situation. That didn't happen. And, that's just some of those little things that you really kind of want to see out of a punter. And he just had an okay leg. He just never was, the guy that was really going to help your team and field position. And as a punter, that's pretty much the majority of your job is to try to get as many long fields as you possibly can for the opposing offense. That just didn't happen for Ty Long. So I think that's definitely a position going into next year that the Chargers should look to upgrade.
And I mean, Ty Long's, was bottom third in the league as far as just average punt distance, but a lot of that is on the coverage units as well. Sure. So I don't want to put it all on him, but it's not like he's doing any kind of world-beating numbers. But one person I would say to keep an eye on as we head into this offseason would have to be Chris Tabor from the Bears, who obviously just got rid of Matt Nagy, just got rid of their GM. They cleaned house there. He is already interviewed with the Panthers for the same position. He hasn't taken it yet at this point. But one of the reasons it makes a lot of sense for Brandon Staley is the two spent time together in 2018. And the other nice thing about him is he has recent success. I mean, the Bears were 7th this year in special teams DVOA. They were good. 8th last year. Yeah, I mean, when we were talking about 32, 31, 28, 25, hearing 7 and 8, back-to-back top 10 seasons from his unit, and he's been there since 2018, and he had a Pro Bowl returner in every season, and it was 3 different dudes, which was pretty impressive. Cordarrelle Patterson twice, Jakeem Grant once, and Tariq Cohen was the other one. But every year, they're getting production out of those units. So especially as a guy who has ties with Brandon Staley, I'd be really surprised if he doesn't get an interview. And I mean, I definitely would be very interested.
Yeah, and as you should be. I mean, imagine what this Chargers team would look like if they had a top 10 special teams DVOA unit. Like, that would make a humongous difference. I mean, shorter fields on offense, longer fields to defend on defense, maybe a couple of special plays from a punt return unit, just better overall production from that unit. It's going to alleviate stress from every other position on the football field. So if you get better special teams production, the Chargers are going to be a better team. So they would be stupid to not at least extend the invitation to Tabor to get that relationship with Brandon Staley rekindled again.
Well, the nice thing about him, too, is when he took that unit over in Chicago, they were the 25th ranked team. And then by the end of it, they're the 7th, right? So,
and how important development is for Brandon Staley. And so that's pretty tangible evidence right there.
Yeah, and I do think Derius Swinton deserves a lot of, credit for what he did this season, knowing firsthand what he was working with, right? Which is not a lot of talent, and a lot of those guys could come back and be, key special teams factors for the Chargers next season. And I think a lot of the reason why is because of what Derius Swinton was, did to change that culture, right? Because it
Yeah.
wasn't, you didn't feel like it was terrible entering that last game of the season. You felt like it was definitely headed in the right direction, including, having one of the best return men in the NFL in Andre Roberts, one of the best in-season acquisitions that I can remember, earning an all-pro nod. Should the Chargers bring him back this year? I mean, I'm saying yes, but we'll get more into that in the next segment. I need to tell you guys about my favorite Built Bar protein bar. I always do that because I always start thinking about Built Bar, and it's like my favorite flavor of Built Bar is Built Bar, just because I'm always thinking about it. But Built Bar is the best protein bar you guys are going to find out there. And right now, especially with New Year's resolutions in the works, right? This is a great way for you to have a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. You can feel like you're getting that little cheat snack, that little cheat meal, something to get you through your day while you're actually having something that's huge in protein, ton of fiber in it, while being low in sugar and low on carbs, which is pretty much what every diet seems to be based on these days. So if you'll find it, I mean, it definitely fits in my diet, and I get something that breaks up the monotony of, the chicken and broccoli. Right? You need something that's a treat. You don't want to grab a protein bar and have it be chalky or waxy, taste like a chemical spill. You want something that feels like you're cheating on your diet while you're not doing it, and that's what you get with Built Bar. My favorite flavors are cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie. You could also go mint brownie, which is good, salted caramel. Cherry Barcia is obviously another one with a great name as well. And there's limited time flavors coming out all the time. But you guys can even save some money since you listen to this show. If you go to built.com, you can use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. It's promo code LOCKED15, all caps, one word, for 15% off at built.com. All right, David. Well, now it's time to get into some well-deserved All-Pro nominations. And this is something that is not to be confused with a Pro Bowl, right? This is something that is different because Pro Bowl obviously has fan voting in it. This is done by the Associated Press, where there's 50 voters that vote on the All-Pro every year. And they basically get one vote for each position, right? And 2 edge rushers, and so on and so forth.
Much
But
more highly regarded amongst the players. This is the award that they want. Pro Bowl is very arbitrary because it's voted on. The All Pro nod that holds some weight.
well, another thing about that, you can't get substituted off the All-Pro team, right? I mean,
Right.
there's no,
Yeah.
my team's in the Super Bowl, so I'm not an All-Pro player
No.
anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
there's so many alternates and things like that, and so many more players taken to the Pro Bowl that it has less of a meaning, even though I think
Yeah.
the
Waters it
part
down a
that's
little bit.
voted on by the, coaches and the players is still a little underrated because that still
Yeah.
definitely means something. But we started talking about Andre Roberts. What an in-season acquisition, David. I mean, second in the
One of the
NFL in
best.
average return yards, has the 101-yard kickoff return touchdown, multiple other 40-plus yard returns. And I mean, for me, I think it's no doubt about it, re-signed going into the offseason. I know people are upset about the fumble, but we just saw a spark at that position that we literally probably hadn't seen in, 10 plus years. I mean, the last kickoff return touchdown was 2012. It was Michael Spurlock. So when you get a guy that comes in and does that so quickly in a unit that was struggling so much before he got there, because that's the other thing. I mean, 4 dudes had return kicks for the Chargers. None of them got over 17 yards per return. You're trying to get out to the 25, so the math doesn't add up there. This dude comes in, averages 27 yards per return. He did more of that too. He was better than that even just since he joined with the Chargers after the Texans released him midseason. I mean, what more can you say about this dude, David? I mean, to me, you automatically bring him back, and he absolutely earned that Pro Bowl, All-Pro nod.
He absolutely did. I mean, when he came in, he made an immediate impact. He really brought some juice to a unit that was putting KJ Hill, a 7th-round pick, out there who has absolutely no speed whatsoever. Coming into the NFL, he didn't have any speed. So putting him as a kick returner, where you really need that kind of next level juice, he never possessed any of that. So for those people who don't want to bring Andre Roberts back, just remember that KJ Hill was out there trying to return kicks, and it was an ugly, ugly sight. When Andre Roberts came in, he was changing the field position in a big way for the Chargers, creating shorter fields. And a lot of the times when he had those big returns, that turned into touchdown drives because of it. So Andre Roberts made a huge impact. I think it's a guarantee for 1 year. It's not going to be super expensive. He made a difference. You got to reward that. You got to bring him back. No question about it.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more expensive now just because of that
Sure.
All-Pro nod, right? I mean, I think there's a few teams that feel like they could use a returner like that, and there's obviously no guarantee that he comes back, but there's obviously no one waiting in the wings for the Chargers that you feel like is that explosive player, right? And hopefully they get somebody like that in the draft. But either way, I think you bring back Andre Roberts and see if he's not still the best returner, because it would obviously be hard to beat with his vision in the open field was so good. The way he saw the
Absolutely.
seams and set up his blocks and brought that professionalism that Brandon Staley talked about was really cool to see. But another thing that was really cool to see was the Chargers having their first really good center again since Nick Hardwick getting a second team All-Pro honors this year with Corey Linsley, maybe the best center in football for my money. I mean, seeing him every weekend, I would say that he is. 0 sacks allowed, David, in the 2021 season. He only let Justin Herbert get hit twice in the entire year. 2 quarterback hits allowed for Corey Linsley. He gets an All-Pro, second team All-Pro nod. And now, I mean, back-to-back, right, for Corey Linsley. That's really awesome to see. And then, I mean, just 10 pressures allowed for the year. I mean, that's not even David to talk about all the things that he did for Justin Herbert as far as helping him diagnose things, setting up the blocks, calling things out on the defense when he's, the only person standing, staring at the defense while everybody else is in the huddle. I mean, this dude came in, he was made the highest paid center in the NFL and lived up to every penny.
Undoubtedly. I mean, he came in and it was night and day. The Chargers have been looking for that commander, nice. that guy that you can really trust in the middle, a guy who just makes he's like a Derwin James. He makes everyone around him better because of his quality and his level of play and what he demands, because he goes out there and plays like that every single play. He demands that the people next to him elevate their level of play so they can match what he is capable of doing. But the amount of pressure it took off of Justin Herbert to not have to worry about, kind of setting the protections and getting as much information, trying to figure out what the alignment was, what the defense was in. All that information is only going to help Justin Herbert out. And I think it's, it's really, really apparent how much he helped out this offense, helped out Justin Herbert. He was phenomenal this year. He, the number one, the first team All-Pro guy, Jason Kelce, he allowed 17 pressures and 1 sack. Corey Linsley, 10 pressures and 0 sacks. So that just goes to show you he didn't get the first team All-Pro nod, but he probably should have.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely had an argument for it, right? And he missed a game as well. And you saw how much they missed him when he was out, even though, Quessenberry did a really good job in his absence. It just isn't the same. The running game really struggled the most.
Well,
right?
You see what a solid center does, and then you see what an all-pro center does.
Exactly. I mean, it was still a pretty significant drop-off. But, I mean, the Chargers offensive line played so much better. And there's a lot of guys like Frank Smith that deserve a lot of credit for that, right? Especially. But Corey Linsley deserves a ton of credit, too, for that because he's just such a great player. And, I mean, also being the Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee for the Chargers, a great person as well. I mean, it's hard not to root for that family, right? And his wife's on Twitter, and they're all super, super nice. And it's hard not to root for a guy like that, especially when they're that goddamn good. Yes. But talking about goddamn good, one of the most impressive things that I've seen this season was Rashawn Slater stealing 2 votes away from Trent Williams because – I'm not going to lie to you guys. Like Jonathan Taylor, if he's getting all 50 votes, I mean, Trent Williams, you would think would be another guy who could potentially pull off an all 50 votes unanimous decision. No second team honors going to anyone. And that's just how good Rashawn Slater was as a rookie, David. And we've talked about it so many times. I mean, what it means to have a left tackle of significance, right? And to have a probable left tackle, right? You'd have settled for a top 15 left tackle, a top 10 left tackle. Right now, the Chargers have a top 2 left tackle, according to the All-Pro voting. He was able to get 2 votes and hold off a couple of other guys with 1 vote. And he absolutely deserved it because this dude came in and burst onto the scene as one of the best left tackles in the NFL. And was that refreshing?
I can't help but smile whenever you bring up Rashawn Slater just because of how incredible this dude was this year. From game 1, you knew as soon as he stepped out there going up against Chase Young and dominating him in that first game, you're like, okay, this dude is for real. And then
for real.
It carried all throughout the season. They ran behind him with great success. He was able to go out there on an island, eliminate the best pass rusher. The best pass rushers on the other team started out against Rashawn Slater, and then they gravitated very quickly over to the right side to take on the Chargers' right tackle because they were getting shut down by Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater was dominant in everything that he did. To have a dude that good this early on in his career on a rookie contract, it's almost as valuable as having a quarterback on a rookie contract. And oh, by the way, the Chargers have that as well. So the future of this team and of this offense is in very, very good hands with Justin Herbert. and his blind side protector, Rashawn Slater.
And credit to the Chargers front office. I mean, they should have been protecting him before this season, obviously, and Phillip Rivers
Yeah,
before him.
Phillip
But
Rivers, man. Oh.
but they saw the commodity that they had, and they went all in on the offensive side of things, especially with the offensive line, which probably hurt the defense a little bit, right? To be honest, but Rashawn Slater, just like the fact that he's manhandling grown ass dudes after not playing football in over a year, right? Taking a season off
Oh,
and
yeah.
actually taking that time to go make yourself better. And then going up against the premier guys in the NFL, and one of the 4 sacks you gave up all year was because Austin Eckler
Shout out to Big Duke.
Miles pushed Myles Garrett back into Justin Herbert after Rashawn Slater was actually handling it fine. Like, that dude went up against a catalog of great edge rushers. He also went up against the Cowboys, right? And Micah Parsons for some of that, even though Micah Parsons spent most of that day torturing Storm Norton. Like, he went up against the best of the best that the NFL has to offer, and he just kept stepping up to each opportunity and delivering every time. I mean, never off balance, never seemed surprised by anything, never panicked, right? I mean, there was never just any
Didn't get a
totally
lot of
blown
penalties
assignment.
either. He always knew when to let guys go and, let Justin Herbert kind of escape.
Yeah.
He was just so technically proficient. And that was one of the first things that he said when he got drafted. He's like, hey, I am a technician. And that showed true throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think, David, I mean, to have that dude and to get that pick right is, I mean, one of the things that I'm sure is one of the reasons that Tom Telesco still has a job right now.
It has to be.
That
It
is
has
such
to
a
be.
huge pick, and to stay put, right, and then not get that. I mean, imagine what we'd be doing had he stayed put and somebody else picked Rashawn Slater, right, and you don't end up getting him. I mean, we don't know who the Chargers first round pick would have been, right? Somebody else would have fallen, obviously, in that scenario, but like to know that dude turned into this and like you had a chance for him, right? Credit for staying there, credit for making the pick. Thank God they did, because wow, that dude is so good. It just doesn't look like anything special. You know what I mean? As far as offensive lineman goes, and the dude just goes out and murks people. Like, he just is always the guy that, it seems to be winning every single matchup up front. But there was another guy that obviously deserved some credit during this list and got some votes, but did not make it to the All-Pro team this year after doing it only one other time in his rookie season. So we're going to talk about whether Derwin James got snubbed in this one and who could potentially make the All-Pro list in 2022 coming up after this. But first, I need to tell you guys that the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast is BetOnline.ag. BetOnline is the only place that I'm placing all my bets, and you can bet during these playoff runs. I'm betting all the time. We even get a Monday night playoff football game tonight. So many days to bet, and the only place I go is BetOnline because they have the best odds props that you're going to find. I mean, the player props on there that you can make for yourself, especially in these games where there's only one game pretty much at a time, and you get to really hone in on the guys you're watching. BetOnline makes it so easy to do all of those things, and they have the best contest going on as well. So as we get closer to the Super Bowl, I know everyone bets on the Super Bowl. You're not going to find a better place than BetOnline to do it because they're going to have the best specials. So many contests they have going on where you guys can make so much money. And since you listen to the show, you can even get some free money because if you go to the new updated website, you guys can use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, one word, to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's free money to play with at BetOnline, especially with the Super Bowl coming up, guys. The playoffs, I'm offering you some free money to bet with at BetOnline. It's the only place that you guys should be betting with. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers they have available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, David, we talked about the guys who rightfully earned their spots on the All-Pro list, and I think there's just one guy that it's missing, right? And it's Derwin James. And I think that even if you a second team All-Pro, I mean, I would have been fine with it. And I think, like, that's the thing is, like, the reason we didn't make a big deal about all those dudes being second team All-Pro in the last segment is just like, that means you're top 2 in the NFL at your position.
Yeah.
Like, there's 32 teams, and you have a top 2 dude at that spot, which is why it's so tough to do it and why it's such a big deal when a guy can make the All-Pro list, right? And I think that Derwin James has made it already as a rookie, which is incredibly impressive. And I think he deserved to make at least the second team All-Pro bid this year selection as well, David, just because that's how impressive he was. And the crazy thing is, like, I think this was kind of like a year of him ramping back up to full speed. Like, I think next year he could be even better, but that doesn't mean he didn't deserve to get it this year.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. I mean, the first year in the defense for everyone. And also, let's not forget that Derwin James was put all over the football field. he wasn't just a safety. He was a
Yeah.
linebacker. He was an edge rusher. I mean, he was, he wore 5 or 6 different hats because that's what this defense required of Derwin James. I mean, that's how he was able, that's how this defense was going to be maximized, was having him all over the football field. And that really wasn't taken into account. And it did have, a little bit of an effect on the overall numbers. I think the big thing that kind of sticks out is he didn't have the big sexy interception numbers that they really kind of want from this position. He dropped a couple throughout the year, but Derwin James did play at an all pro level. And I think, you take some exceptions, not so much with the first team all pro selection. I think Kevin Byard had an incredible year and he won that just very deservingly. But there's a couple other guys on that second team all pro list that definitely probably should have been replaced by Derwin James.
Yeah, and I mean, you're splitting here. It's a lot of these guys had great seasons. Jordan Poyer probably had the best season out of any safety, right? And I mean, he didn't have the most votes. Kevin Byard did. And when you play, that's the
By
other
a
thing
lot.
about this too, is like, look at the teams these guys are playing for. Like Justin Simmons is the only exception. Obviously, Broncos didn't make the playoffs. But at the same time, though, I mean, Micah Hyde, Kevin Byard, Jordan Poyer, all of those teams are in the playoffs. Some of the best teams in the playoffs. That does make a difference in it. But the interception numbers, right? I mean, Poyer had 5, Byard had 5, Justin Simmons had 5. The one I take exception with, though, because he doesn't even really have that argument, is Micah Hyde. And the other thing is, too, Derwin James led every safety in tackles, right?
Yeah.
So he's way above all these dudes in tackles, but tackles aren't, the best indicator of how good a player is, obviously. But when you're played the way Derwin James was this year, it's going to take away from stats like pass breakups and interceptions because he's not just playing back and waiting to undercut routes and get interceptions, right? He still should have had a couple more, but he's used everywhere. I mean, out of all these dudes, he has the second most tackles for us with 7, right? He has more interceptions than Micah Hyde. Micah Hyde only had 74 tackles, according to Pro Football Reference. Going against Derwin James, 118. Derwin James had 2 sacks, according to Pro Football Reference. According to Pro Football Focus, he had 3 sacks, right? And he also, Micah Hyde only had 1 sack this season and 4 tackles for us. So, I mean, that's just the stats, right? Obviously. But I think when you watch these players play, and I haven't watched every single Buffalo Bills game this year, but I have seen them, and I know they are a good tandem of safeties on the back end there. I just think that Derwin James brings something different. And I love Micah Hyde as a player, but I think Derwin James, because if you're going to, say he should be in there, you got to take somebody out. So I think he probably should have been a second team all pro player, playing only 15 games, coming back from only playing, 5 games in the 2 seasons leading up to it. Mm-hmm. All incredibly impressive things. Like, there's no slouch on being the next guy up because he was 5th and the 4 safeties made the first or second team, David. So there was no slouch. He did get some respect there. He still should have been second team all pro. And I think next year he will absolutely be on that list again. And I think every player that made the list for the Chargers this year has a chance to be back on that list next year, especially Rashawn Slater, especially Corey Linsley, right? I mean, those dudes are just 2 of the top players out their position already. But will there be another one, David? And I think that's the question because this isn't Pro Bowl, right? Chargers had 6 Pro Bowlers, 5 starters, which is great. Yeah. This is all pro. You have to be top 2 at your position, top 4, right, if you're a safety, top 6 if you're a receiver, you can get in the second team. But do you see another Chargers player making it next year that didn't make it this year?
Yeah, I think there's only one name that comes to mind that's a legitimate option, and I think we both know what that name is. It's Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa had the most strip sacks in the league this year, was a turnover machine in that respect. He did hit 10 sacks, but I still think we're not close to the top level end production that Joey Bosa can provide. I think if you get him another edge rusher to kind of pair in that group, to get him even more one-on-one opportunities, that's going to bode well. Also, another year in this defense, a better defensive tackle, hopefully in the middle, to try to get some pressure in the middle as well, to be able to help him out. More pressure, the better for Joey Bosa. That's only going to get him more of those opportunities where you can't double him as much as every single team in the NFL did this season. I think that if the Chargers' overall defense improves next year, then Joey Bosa is going to improve, and thus he very well could earn that all-pro nod.
And I think he talked about at the beginning of the year how much different this was than the roles he was was in before, besides like his very first season when they were running a 3-4 under John Pagano. But I think he has, had some growing pains a little bit, and I think he's still getting used to that position. And I think you are going to see his best performance, I think, for me in 2022. I honestly believe that because one of the big things that did come away from this year was one of the healthiest seasons we've ever seen from Joey Bosa, and that deserves a lot of credit as well. Derwin James playing 15 games. He will take
Yeah,
that every season. I would sign up for
absolutely.
15 games
Yeah.
of Derwin James. But I think Joey Bosa, yeah, because it would be tough. You're going up against the Myles Garrett, the TJ Watts, right? I mean, the Trey Hendrickson this year made it. Like, he could be a second team All Pro. I mean, Joey Bosa had one of the votes this year. So, I mean, people were still recognizing it. He even has to go up against his own brother, Nick Bosa, who hopefully is okay. But I mean, that dude is really, really good as well. I
Yes.
mean, it's like watching a mirror image. They're so similar to each other, and they're both just so, so good. But I think that you'll see the stats maybe reflect that more, especially if the Chargers can add to that defensive front, because I think the more
Yeah.
impact players you can add there, the more people you have to worry about, the better people you have in coverage to keep the ball in the quarterback's hands longer, the better guys you have in the front to give Joey Bosa more one-on-one opportunities without blitzing Drew Tranquil to get it every single time, right?
Exactly.
Like, those things will all help Joey Bosa take his game to the next level. And I just don't know if I see anyone under contract right now, David, that has a real chance of being an All-Pro next year, unless it was like a total, out of left field situation. Like, I like Matt
Yeah.
Filer. Hopefully they bring back Ode Abushi or whatever. Keenan Allen, I think, at his best could be a top 6 receiver and get that nod. I mean, I think he was real close to Cole Beasley last year when Cole Beasley won it. But I think that it's one of those things where it's just so tough, even for Justin Herbert, because that's the guy
Yeah.
that everyone is listening to this and be like, you haven't talked about Justin Herbert on this part.
Yeah.
I think Justin Herbert will win either a first or second team All-Pro in his career for sure. But right
Yeah.
now, what a murderer's row you have to go to get there, right? I mean, you're talking about you have to beat out Tom Brady and Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers, at
Brady
least
and
for next
Rodgers,
season, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you have Patrick Mahomes you're going up against as well. You have the Josh Allens who just literally scored a touchdown every single drive against the Patriots in the playoffs,
Really
which I
impressive.
didn't know was humanly possible. And then, we'll see what happens to Lamar Jackson if he comes back. I mean, Matthew Stafford's putting up a great season. Kyler Murray had a lot of MVP hype early. There's a lot of competition there, and you have to make it to the top 2. That's just one of those things where, like, that's a really, really tough thing because there's a lot of very talented quarterbacks. And
Yep.
hopefully I'm wrong, David, but obviously you need to bring in some more talent. So we'll see if they can bring in that caliber of player, because right now it seems like out of all the guys, Joey Bosa has the best shot. We'll see what they add to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only other guy that kind of came to mind for me initially was Austin Eckler. I wanted that to be the case, but
Yeah.
just looking at all the other running backs and all the like more pure running backs, right? The guys are going to get a ton of carries.
Yeah.
Like
Jonathan Taylor got 50 votes, so they love the old school running
unanimous.
back.
Right.
Yeah.
The unanimous type of running back there. Obviously you're not taking anything away from that dude. He had a tremendous season. But if Austin Eckler is going to have a season where he has 1,588 plus all-purpose yards and 20 touchdowns and not even get a Pro Bowl nod, let alone an All-Pro consideration, it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen unless they kind of make a new role where it's just like offensive weapon. And then Austin Eckler would definitely be in line for that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Darren Sproles got something weird one time, something along those similar lines. But that's what I was telling you before the show, because I was just like, I mean, you're not making the Pro Bowl. He wasn't even the first alternate. What a joke is that, right? And I
Yeah, it's
mean, the dude scored
ridiculous.
20 touchdowns. You also have Derrick Henry coming back to the conference next year, right? Who
Yeah.
was leading everything before he left. Even
Yeah, and he
more
was still
than
leading the league like after like 7 or 8 weeks of him being
Yeah,
injured.
and he's
It was
also in a conference
ridiculous.
with Nick Chubb, who's really
Yeah.
good. So it's just tough at that position. I love Austin Eckler. I think he's such an invaluable piece to this offense. It just doesn't seem like it's an award set up for a running back like him to go out there and win. And I think
Yeah.
that's really just the part about it that's really, really tough. But I think, it was great to see that this year, because the Chargers don't get all pros every year. I mean, most
Yeah.
years they go without one. So to see that recognition was cool. I do think they have bright things on the horizon. I think Derwin James will get back to the promised land there. But there's also some players in the playoffs, David, that are making me get some ideas of some things the Chargers need to add in the playoffs. I do want to get into that at some point this week, stealing some players for some other teams. What would Deebo Samuel look like on the Chargers? I mean,
Really
don't
good.
get me started on that. But we have some other fun stuff as well. Maybe we'll get into some Twitter Tuesday. We still have some end of season awards that we're going to get into. But to make sure you don't miss it, make sure to subscribe to the new Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you can find the show there. And you can also find the show on all of our social media. If it doesn't pop up there, the Twitter for the Chargers for the show is @LockedOnLAC, and you can also find our @LockedOnChargers Instagram page and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. As always, you can find me on Twitter at DanTalkSports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD. But hope you guys enjoy the off-season content. Thank you for making us your first listen again, and we'll be back every day, and we'll start getting ready for all the exciting things to come. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.